My name's Will Schmier. Welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something it sounds a little nutty. I fully admit this. I think it is, in fact, the exact reason I brushed it off. I never paid attention to it, and it seems as though in the many conversations I've had over the last couple months with other friends and individuals, whether it's through catching up and seeing what they're up to, or they're a coach, or they're even in the field, I will tell you every conversation around breathwork that I've had has been incredible. I think 95% of the people, including myself, brush off the term breathwork because it sounds like some hocus pocus, magical BS that is not worth listening to or not beneficial. And I will tell you, I, for one, as it turns out, was dead wrong. Now, before we hop in, I do want to let you know on the new website for this podcast, which is podcast.lovablesurvivor.com. On there's a menu item to leave a review. You can leave one right on the website, or you can leave one in Apple. It'll take you right to Apple. It'll take you right to Spotify. I genuinely would appreciate it. This podcast, this is episode 10. We're doing pretty well. Things are on a good rhythm. I hope you are finding it beneficial. And my hope is that I hate begging for reviews. I'll be dead ass honest. I feel like it sucks. But it's a thing. If you believe this podcast would be helpful to another stroke survivor, yeah, I think leaving a review would be helpful because they might be able to find it even easier. I do think it's a small enough market that if you're looking for a podcast on stroke and hearing stroke survivor stories or my take on the various things that I've learned along the way, yeah, it's not as crowded of a space, but every review helps. And, shoot me an email, podcast@lovablesurvivor.com. Would love to see how I could help out in some way, shape, or form. Hopefully over the coming months, as I continue to build out the community, I will be able to offer different workshops, and I, at some point, will be able to kind of offer, maybe I can offer a workshop in exchange for a review, things like that. So I do want to do something, but I don't want to do something that is like cheesy or, it is kind of the same thing, but it's not the same thing. I don't want to just start offering gift cards for a review. That just seems tacky. But yeah, shoot me an email. I'd be interested in having a call. If there's something I could do to help answer a question, definitely want to make it worth your while. I know it's kind of annoying to leave those things, so I'll just leave it there. Anyways, back to the show. So breathwork is definitely a term a lot of people, including myself, tend to brush off. And that's because it just sounds like a thing that is not worth paying attention to. Now, like I said, I was dead ass wrong. I will tell you, and I've said this before on my previous podcast, the eye opener for me was a couple things. I think reading Breath by James Nestor, it came out in 2020, honestly, right around or right before COVID. So it's a really interesting book that coincides with that time frame. But yeah, it's, and I'll talk about that later because I do have a couple of books that I recommend because breathing is a really big topic. So I'm going to try to cover high level today. I think my take is if somebody just said to me, do you want to breathe better, Will? I, of course, as a former smoker, a former drinker, somebody who's had issues with circulation, breathing issues, as like I had never really had an official asthma diagnosis, but a lot of asthma, a lot of allergies, just a lot of crap. yeah, I never loved running until this year, past like 6 months. So breathing has been a big eye opener for me. I learned, I think, a couple things. Obviously, breath work is not something I jive with. It sounds corny. It sounds cheesy. It sounds hocus pocus. It sounds awful. But if somebody said, "Are you interested in breathing better?" I would, of course, open my ears a little bit and then take it one step further. Are you interested in breathing better? Here's how: by doing breathing exercises. Okay. I'm starting to listen. I don't know that I'm jumping way off the deep end, but I'm starting to listen when you say it that way. Then you kind of go into, have you ever, what have you tried? Well, I had tried nothing prior. I just assumed that when I quit smoking, when I had my stroke, I just assumed that I would start breathing better. And to some degree, that's probably true. However, I saw many doctors over the course of a couple of years since my stroke. Last year was like year 2 and 3. I think we're actually a little over year 3 now. So we're like into 4 for me. But yeah, I read Breath. That was an eye opener. I kind of just kept digging into the book because James Nestor has a lot of resources in that book. He points you to a lot of places. After going through the whole book, I was intrigued. I just thought, oh, well, I guess I could do better. And then I started kind of going down the rabbit hole, which led me to some videos, which he has on his website that were listed in his book. And I'll put that in the show notes. Just a couple of videos. And one of them was learning how to unblock your nose. Oh shit. I remember as a kid, I was a big boy most of my life, but I used Breathe Right strips in the 90s and they were helpful. They really were. They help open up your nasal passages. And thinking back, I remember hearing my whole life, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Yes, but also no. And I'll get into that. But yeah, it was evident that Breathe Right strips worked. They were just not perfect. And then when you sweat playing sports, they would fall off. So while they were good and they still are helpful, they weren't enough. And so, down the rabbit hole I go. I watched this video about learning how to unblock your nose naturally. Oh man, Patrick McGowan of Oxygen Advantage. He has a YouTube channel. He has a podcast. He has a website. He has live classes. There's a lot of online. He's got a lot of courses and a lot of information. He's been studying breathing since the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. I've met Patrick. I've done his training. I've done his certification program because I got so into this. That has really been the number one life-changing, altering thing that I've done for myself since my stroke. Now, I don't want to brush aside the work that I've done in physical therapy and occupational therapy. I've come a long, long way. From a wheelchair to now running 75 miles a week. My team has been instrumental. I don't want to discredit any of the work that I've done or they've done, but I think breathing for me is single-handedly the thing so far that has really kind of unlocked this next level for me. It has gotten me off of the plateau that I was on. And again, between this podcast, the Lovable Survivor brand, and sort of my other community, larger brand that I'm building out, Survivor Science, is really both are about, finding those things that work for individual survivors who, just things you might not have come across or considered. But anyways, breathing is the one thing that really has been life altering. And this happened last year. So I was a little past year 2, kind of going toward year 3. And I wouldn't say this is a magic pill, but I would say this has definitely been the game changer for me. Now, full disclosure, I had, like I said, I used to be a smoker. So I sort of naturally fell into mouth breathing. And it's clear to me that that may have played a role, much more significant role than you may realize. And I'm only saying that because now that I've done all this research and spent a lot of time in doing breath work and breathing exercises that I've done, I tried Wim Hof. He's another big one. I'll talk about him later. Um, it's one of those things. You go down this rabbit hole and you find a ton of information, and it's just like my mind kept getting blown. Every couple of weeks, I'd find something new and more. And like I said, I worked with Patrick over at Oxygen Advantage, and I haven't gotten officially fully certified because I'm lazy and doing the practical, and I've already done some practicals, but I haven't really documented everything properly. So that's I'm just not a big rule follower, and I don't even really care about the certification. I just care about the information, for me and also for others, because I want to help. Part of the community is things like putting together workshops and things that putting them into formats that work for other people, because not everybody's a podcast. Like my wife, she's deaf, so she might benefit from a PowerPoint workshop with caption, or visual and audio, and some people are just like that in general. So, you know, um, that's part of me building out the community level of things that give people different formats. But anyway, getting off track already. So back to the breathing thing. I think for me, I'd always heard about nasal breathing. I knew it was better to breathe through your nose. I think I did not know how, ja- uh, and like I said, I've gone down this rabbit hole. So it's not that mouth breathing is damaging, but like I was a mouth breather for 35 years, give or take. Like, probably around the age of 5. That's when that research seems to show that young children tend to switch from mouth breathing or from nose breathing to mouth breathing, because we're born breathing through our nose, but at some point around the age of 5, it tends to switch. And that is a societal thing that has been evolution. A lot of this information is in James Nestor's book. It's in a lot of books, and I don't want to bore you with the overly involved science behind it. But yeah, I mean, I think we've seen in other areas of life that things have evolved over time, and they've either gotten worse or they've gotten off track. So here's a couple things about mouth breathing that really they make sense once you see it and once somebody tells you, because you don't necessarily correlate all these things to mouth breathing, or at least I didn't, and I think a lot of people don't, or I would have been turned on to this much sooner. Because reminder, I worked with a number of doctors for a number of different things, just beyond not even just stroke related. It was I had a lot of other things going on top of the stroke, on top of the MS. I've had venous ulcers in my legs, like I've had circulation issues, undiagnosed sleep apnea, so these are correlated to mouth breathing. But some signs you might be mouth breathing are like if you wake up in the morning with a dry mouth, that's a very good indication that you might be mouth breathing during the evenings when you're sleeping, and how you sleep during the evening affects your body and brain during the day. We talk a lot about attention and agitated mind and being distracted. There's a lot of science behind the fact that mouth breathing may, it is tied to, it causes an agitated mind. It causes poor sleep. These are kind of interrelated. Daytime fatigue, brain fog. It's not just for people that are stroke survivors or brain injury survivors or MS. It's just, lack of a lack of sleep causes daytime fatigue, which causes a lack of focus, poor concentration, like an agitated mind. You're all over the place. I'm not saying that switching to nasal breathing immediately will fix all your problems. But I think if you consider long term effects, and if you're a mouth breather for 20 plus years, and this has nothing to do ultimately with size. There are physically fit, competitive major athletes that through my talk with Patrick and different research and courses, like this is not just a big versus small people problem. This is an everybody issue. And so, yeah, I mean, there are things you could do pretty quickly to address these things. And I will say on the other side, there's a diagram, and I'm going to put some links in the show notes, but, I just kind of touched on some of the things that are tied to mouth breathing, but, nose breathing with a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. I'm not talking 10 hours a day. I'm not talking 75 miles a week in terms of running versus nose breathing. I'm just saying with a little bit of effort, maybe 10 minutes a day of simple breathing exercises. And this depends on you and being honest with yourself. I sort of hid that I was a mouth breather. I always knew I was a mouth breather, but I wasn't like a heavy, big guy sitting in the corner making all sorts of noises. I was just kind of quietly mouth breather. And I don't think I'm alone there. I may be the only one who's saying it, but I feel like I'm not alone. And I got to be honest, I think a lot of people might be mouth breathers and not even realize. If I don't have the research in front of me, I tried to look for it before the podcast, but I think it's something like 60% of people mouth breathe for a good portion of the day. Now I could be wrong. That could have been a certain age, but I think it's one of those things like, and I'll get to this too later in this episode, but like you can do some of these exercises, you can read some of these books. And if you're not a nasal breather, you can easily switch. You can start to incorporate some exercises that really kind of unlock the power of nasal breathing. And I know this might sound corny. You have to take this for what it's worth. But I think some immediate things, again, saying breath work, not helpful to anybody. Saying, do you want to fix your breathing? Do you have these issues? Are you agitated? Do you feel tired during the day? Do you have brain fog? Do you sometimes lack focus? It may not be that you're ADHD or ADHD. You might be, but to that point, certainly I'm not dissuading anybody from looking into that and getting tested. But it also could be possible, not guaranteed, but like if you look into breathing and some of the calming effects that nose breathing just in general leads to a calmer mind. I found, even though I had been using the CPAP, which is ultimately super helpful from the early days after the stroke, but in the last couple of months since I've kind of switched to more concentrated nose breathing. I know I'm not doing it all the time, but it's a much more, I've trained myself to the point where I don't have to think about it all the time. I'm now just doing more nasal breathing. Yeah, sometimes I get off track. I'm just aware of it now, so I'm able to correct it very quickly. I'm also not doing it 24/7, so that's a huge help for me as somebody who was a habitual mouth breather 24/7. Like, I wake up feeling fresh. Sometimes, meh, not always, but like sometimes not so much. But yeah, I have noticed calmer mind, deeper sleep. When I do get to sleep, I've never really had sleep issues. That's the one area I've never had a major problem. But yeah, I don't wake up with dry mouth. So I realize that I am doing more nasal breathing through the night. I wake up refreshed, unless I just don't get enough hours of sleep, which is pretty rare now because I've kind of conditioned myself to to have that better routine. And I also allow myself to adjust if I do work late. I let my wife know. She's kind of on board as long as I'm not taking advantage. She will let me sleep in to allow my body to get that proper rest. But again, because I'm running, because I've had the stroke, because I have MS, she's great there. And I try not to do it too often. In terms of staying up too late, and then clarity of mind, laser focused. The nose breathing has really been a major game player in terms of my running. My overall health is a lot better, and I think since I switched to really concentrating on nasal breathing more, I would say like 90% of my day is nasal breathing. I feel inspired. I feel refreshed. Like I feel like every day I'm just, obviously there's other things. I'm no longer drinking. I'm no longer smoking. But because I fixed my breathing and realized, oh, by unblocking my nose, I can do the nasal breathing by doing 10 minutes of nasal breathing exercises a day, or sometimes more, sometimes less, depends on the day. But like on the whole, I'm getting a good amount. I'm working out. I treat my breathing exercises the same way I treat my running, the same way I treat gym, the same way I treat other cardio, whether that's something at the gym, whether it's Peloton. I've done Peloton now 200 or 90 something days in a row. I've been running 170 something. I mean, I'm losing track of these numbers, but I think I did a week update over the weekend. I think it was like 175 running days in a row. I mean, I'm still 6'8". I'm actually under 325 pounds, but I keep saying 325 pounds because I'm pretty close to like right at like the 300 high 290s right now. Reluctant to go under 300 until it's definitely solidly a solid 10 under. But right now it kind of fluctuates. And when you're a 300-pound dude who's 6'8", I will tell you, I could be 305 one day and I could be 285 the next day. So until it's consistently in the twos, I'm going to stay with 300. But yeah, I'm down to 300. And again, I can't give you a better testimonial about the power of nose breathing, because all the things that are mouth breathing are now not things that I really have an issue with on a daily basis the way I used to. Which again, it's an agitated mind, poor sleep, daytime fatigue. It's a lot of things a lot of us experience, and we blame on other things. Like I have children. They're a pain in my ass, like any other parent who probably knows this. Kids are a pain in the ass. Doesn't matter if they're 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, I would say it's slightly easier when they're 20 because they can drive themselves, but they're not really less of a pain in the ass. So yeah, I mean, my smaller children still very much rely on me. My older one does not rely on me as much for day-to-day things, but yeah, it's not really any easier. I've adjusted my whole life as a result of the stroke and then the MS, but really, I got to be honest, I can't say this enough, and I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but the power of switching, making a concentrated effort to go from mouth breathing to nasal breathing has been a real significant difference and upgrade in my overall health and quality of life. It sounds so dumb. It sounds so obvious, but I don't think it is. Because I think if it was, I would have heard about it for the first 3 years. I didn't hear a fucking peep out of a single doctor, a single therapist. Nobody really turned me on to this. I just kind of fell into it. I mean, if I owe anybody a thank you, I owe my sister a thank you, because she's the one who recommended the book. Reminder, she recommended it to me, I think in 2021, a solid like year to year and a half before I read it. Yeah, and I just read it last year. I started going down the rabbit hole, and it's been a game changer for me ever since. Now, I'm not saying it's going to change everybody's life the way it changed mine. I had a lot of things wrong. I had a lot of things that were, sleep apnea. I thought my lack of focus and concentration really was due to stroke, which may still be the case, and it may still be related to MS, and I may still be ADHD. However, breathing at least has helped me remove some of these parts of the equation. So my point is here, there's no downside to reading a couple books about breathing. There's no downside to taking my word for this and going out, looking at the research and figuring out, hey, am I a mouth breather? Do I wake up with a dry mouth in the morning? Oh, maybe I am. I've used, they make a tape that you can they make several different tapes, depending on your level of comfortability. That's that a word. Anyways, they make a couple of tapes that if you struggle to just keep your mouth shut naturally, they do make some sleeping tapes. Some people may, I caution you to test everything before you just do it. I also recommend you heed all the warnings. And there are some breathing exercises that, are better for others. Some are not recommended if you're pregnant or you're like me, you've had a stroke. I mean, I kind of push the limits on everything, but I make sure that I don't put myself in a situation that makes you uncomfortable or it's going to cause some kind of panic. So, breathing, it is super powerful, but I will tell you, there's no rush, take your time with these exercises. Make sure, whether it's box breathing, inhaling, exhaling, just be careful when you're doing these things because you can get overwhelmed. So just ease into it. If you find you are a mouth breather and you want to switch to nasal breathing, again, I think there are some smaller, simpler exercises. I know it can be exciting to get into them once you find them. If you find that they're beneficial, just take it easy. Don't overdo it. Because this is one of those things too. Like once you go down this rabbit hole, if you find that you were a mouth breather and you're looking to switch to nasal breathing and you're finding the experience to be a good one, it takes some time, but it also is a natural thing. There's no the time from getting the information, practicing a couple exercises, getting the hang of a couple exercises, and starting to see the benefits. The turnaround time is honestly, I'm telling you, I don't even think, I think a month into this, I went from a much better shaped guy, but I went from finding this all out last summer to practicing it every day for about 2 months. And I practiced with Wim Hof. I practiced with Patrick McGowan. There are a couple other books. There's one more book that I'll mention towards the end of the podcast, but I really got into nasal breathing, and I did all the research. I found all the research. I jumped headfirst into the deep end, and I would say within 2 months of really putting some concentrated practice and effort here, it really upped my game. I was doing the Peloton already last summer at this point, but I went from doing it twice a day to doing 6 rides a day. And then I got so tired of the Peloton that I started running. I was just like, oh, I fixed my breathing. I bet I could run. And what do you know? It took a couple weeks of slowly progressing into running, but and again, I'm not a hardcore marathoner. I'm not going to be the fastest guy out there because I have some physical limitations. But the fact that I can even run at all at 6'8", 325 is kind of insane to me. And I'm telling you, it's all because of nose breathing. It's all because I keep practicing that. In through the nose, out through the nose. The big thing. There's a lot of research behind that. That's that sort of built in, trying to find my notes here, that built-in resistance of breathing through your nose is really beneficial. And I think, again, for me, the big aha moment was like, oh shit, I can unblock my nose naturally, by you can watch this video. I'm going to put it in the show notes because I'm not going to be able to describe it very good. But you basically hold your nose and pinch it. In through your nose, out through your nose, in through your nose, pinch your nose, hold it, and you kind of just sway. You'll see in the video, sway side to side for about 30, 45 seconds. And, you let go. As you let go, you breathe in through your nose immediately. The nitric oxide builds up in your nasal cavity. And it's just like, you do this a couple times for 30 to 45 seconds, give or take, whatever you're comfortable with. You let go, you breathe in through your nose, give yourself a minute break, do it again, do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and you should really be able to unblock your nose, and you'll see. And even if it doesn't fully unblock, you're going to see, oh crap, like this actually worked. It's super crazy. And I think, like I said, the aha moment was like, how did I have so many doctors, so many therapists, and every one of them has been great along the way. But I had no idea about the power of nasal breathing. And I'll tell you, Patrick McGowan, I read these books. I've talked to him. I've been in his live classes with him to get certified and trained properly. And he himself will tell you he's not great on social media. Now, I think he's giving himself, I think he's not being fair to himself. He's actually great on social media, but I think he just lacks, he's like my age. So like, he's very well known in the breathing community. You see him everywhere. He's really great on camera. He's a great person. He's great on social, but like, I think he just doesn't love it. He's got a daughter and a wife. I don't know if he has multiple kids, but I just remember he had to pick up one of them. I remember he had a daughter because I have a daughter who played soccer. And so, my point is, I think, it's probably our generation is that love-hate with social media. But he's fantastic. And I think he does very well for himself. I just think he's built up this Oxygen Advantage company because he knows the power of it, and he wants other people to kind of speak to the power of it. I'm sure he would love to, but he also probably doesn't want to film 45 TikToks a week. He'd rather just do, online live classes. I think everybody has their take on how they want to do things, and he's no different. I just think he's written so many books. He's a thorough as hell researcher. I will tell you that he researches like nobody I've ever really met or spoken to. Now that maybe that he's kind of as close to the medical field, but not in the medical field technically, that I know, so maybe that's it. But like, I've learned so many things outside of breathing from Patrick, even like what a DOI is. I had no idea. I guess, I just never went to school, did that level of research for things. But yeah. So the power of nose breathing versus mouth breathing. And the thing I want to say, the quote that I love that Patrick says, I think in his books, and he even said it, I remember it specifically when I did the live training, is that mouths are for eating and noses are for breathing. And that one stuck with me. And it makes a hell of a lot of sense. Noses are in fact for breathing and mouths are for eating. It's hard to argue with that. It's hard to deny. And he'll even agree with you that breathwork is probably a big reason why people are turned off to breathing, because they don't realize, again, myself included, did not realize. I think if you just say, no, it's not breath work, just say breathing exercise. Like, I feel like that alone, I could tell you in like the 40 or 50 calls that I've been on with various friends, colleagues and stuff, when I talk to them about this, they're like, oh yeah, shit, that makes it sound way less worse. That makes it sound like a real thing. That makes a whole lot more sense. So yeah, I mean, and again, I'm going to link to some different things, but there's so many. There's like there's hundreds of benefits. It goes just beyond the basics. I really only covered sort of high level things here on this episode. But another one I'll tell you is that, and I'll kind of wrap this up here. But I think, like I said, you could switch to nasal breathing. You could start with some simple exercises like unblocking your nose, and they'll put some in the show notes. It's a great exercise, really simple, similar to the unblocking your nose exercise. But another one is just simple breath holds, like breathe in through your nose, out through your nose, in through your nose, pinch and hold. Hold it for 2 to 5 seconds. This is called like a small breath hold. That's exactly what it is. This is not rocket science. You hold it 2 to 5 seconds. You let go. Breathe in through your nose. Continue breathing naturally for about 10 seconds through your nose, in through your nose, out through your nose, in through your nose, out through your nose. And then you kind of just repeat that over and over and do that simple breath hold for a couple of minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes. Pinch and hold every two, pinch and hold for about 5 seconds, regular breath for 10 in and out through the nose. And do that, like I said, repeat that for about 3 minutes. That's a really simple, basic one, but it gets you in the habit of nasal breathing without putting too much pressure on you. And it's a great one to get started with. And I think unblocking your nose is a huge, huge thing. And I think we'll do another episode on breathing because there are so many really great, simple exercises. And I will kind of touch on the books that I want to mention because, again, I did talk about Breath, which is by James Nestor, Patrick McGowan, who's written a couple of different books. They're all available on Kindle, Audible, Oxygen Advantage, which is back from 2012, believe it or not. And I think it's come out in another edition with some updates. In 2021, he also wrote The Breathing Cure, which was very similar, but adds some of the COVID. And I think that's super important because that obviously has become a major thing in the world. It even seems like this past quarter, people that I know who have been vaccinated, a lot of breakthrough cases. I was surprised because it seemed like it just kind of came out of nowhere this last couple of months, especially February, March. But I know for people that don't live in Florida, it probably gets cooler. And then again, Wim Hof is another one. He's got some different books. His is a little bit more, I would say, beneficial if you have MS. It's a little different take on breathing. He's not as focused on nasal breathing, but I think there's some good nuggets there. And then the last one that I recommend is Breath by Melissa Branich. She's got a great one with it's called the rock and roll exercise. And I think that's a great one for the diaphragm, which is the one last thing I wanted to touch on, which is that I, until the age of 39, I've heard of the diaphragm. I know I'm not an idiot. I went to college. Like, I just never really put a lot of thought into the diaphragm or really looked into like, why can't I feel? Turns out the diaphragm has no nerve endings. Did not know that. I guess I just didn't pay attention to that part of health class or nobody ever mentioned that. But that was a game changer. I just thought I was dumb. It turns out, oh, well, you can't feel your diaphragm because, again, it has no nerve endings. It never occurred to me to look at a textbook to figure out where the diaphragm is or really dig into that, or why when I was breathing, I couldn't find my diaphragm. Turns out, if you look at the books, if somebody told me it was shaped like a pizza, I probably would have been much more interested. And what I like about Alyssa's book and the rock and roll breathing exercise, and again, she will tell you nasal breathing is the beneficial way, but I think if you're trying to learn about your body and kind of get some of the basics with breathing. I would say mouth breathing here in the beginning is not, you don't not do something because it involves mouth breathing. I would say two things. A lot of people breathe kind of shallow breaths, a lot of shoulder movement up and down. I would say upper chest breathing. If you're really not feeling the belly, I think where Belinda hits it on the head is really incorporating the belly part, because I think that's helpful early on your nasal breathing kind of journey. Because with the belly breathing, it really forces the body to get the air further in and down, which can be tricky initially, I think. But yeah, she's got a lot of great information in her books. And I think, like I said, we'll do another episode on breathing. I'll get more specific. I really just wanted to do high level today. And I think we're already about 41 minutes into this podcast. So thank you for bearing with me on this episode. Again, it's Breathe, which is by Belinda Branich. It's Breath by James Nestor. And then the other two are Patrick McGowan's books, Oxygen Advantage and The Breathing Cure. All four books are game changers. And then please don't forget about Wim Hof. He kind of gets the crazy guy, Dutchman. He's great. I say, when it comes to breathing, if you bought these 5 books, you spend $100, you spend a little bit of time doing these exercises, you will see how big of an impact this can have. And this is something that often gets overlooked, because I think we all take advantage or take for granted the fact that, like, okay, well, I must be breathing because I'm alive. Yeah, that's true. But I think we all overlook this, including people from the medical community, because I would have heard about it much sooner if people were talking about this regularly in the medical community. And I just think it's one of those things that gets overlooked. Again, because if we're alive, we're breathing, obviously, but we could be doing it better. It could be optimized. And I think looking into it, I promise you, again, the last thing I could say, I can't give a better testimonial to the power of breathing through your nose than the fact that I'm doing 75 plus miles a week as a stroke survivor on, I'm not running 10,000 feet of elevation, but the fact that I'm a 40-year-old stroke survivor living with MS, running in a black hoodie in the state of Florida in the middle of spring at 6'8" and 325 pounds. I don't know. Do you need a better testimonial to the power of nasal breathing? And yeah, I'd love to hear if it's working out for you, if you tried it, if it's beneficial, if you have some other tips when it comes to breathing. And again, last thing I'll say is, if you happen to be an individual who is a new survivor and you find yourself in a wheelchair or bedridden, you can do a lot of these breathing exercises in your chair. It's something you can do if you're having trouble walking. Yeah, I mean, I just wish that I would have gotten onto this sooner when I was in the wheelchair, because it's one of those things that you can do almost in any condition. Again, talk to your medical professionals. But yeah, I think there's a lot of helpful things in these books, more than I can give you on this podcast. So thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you found this beneficial, and we can talk about it more. I will try to stay more focused. I'm just super passionate about breathing because, again, it's been the game changer for me. So I hope it is for you. I hope you find success with it. If you have any questions, hit me up on social media. Hit me up on, the email and the podcast, on the show notes, podcast at lovablesurvivor.com. You can go to the main website that's up and running now. So we will leave it there. I appreciate you, and bye.